Hi, so I'm Avery Breyer, and today I'm here with Mark J. Orr. He's a certified financial planner, retirement income certified professional, and fee-based investment advisor. He has also published several books on the topic of retirement planning, which are excellent, by the way. And Mark, thank you so much for being here. I was really impressed by the information you shared in your books. And I'm excited that everybody watching this today is going to have a chance to learn from you in this interview because you have extensive knowledge in this area. And to everybody watching, whether you're decades away from retirement or you're only a few years away from it, you'll get great value from this interview. Mark's going to be joining us on audio. We had a little bit of technical troubles, but that's all that really matters is that you can hear what he has to say. So we're going to get started with the first question now. So in your book, Get Me to Zero, you talk about 7 strategies to get you to paying zero tax during retirement that are intended to be implemented by people who are 10 to 30 years away from retirement. But they can also work for some who are only 5 to 10 years away from it. Now, before we dive into some of these strategies, it's important for people to understand you're thinking about tax rates today versus what they could be in future. Can you explain what you think is likely to happen to tax rates in future and why? Because I think it's really important for everyone watching to understand before we dive deeper into the interview.
Well, great, Avery. It's good to be here, and it's probably a good thing the video isn't working. I have a face for radio anyway. So, let me just talk about 5 reasons that I think and that tax rates are going to have to be higher in the future. And I'm not talking 5 or 10 years. I'm talking 15, 20, 30 or more years down the road. So and when I'm in a seminar and with people or even in a class with advisors, I was in Dallas last week with 30, 40 advisors from our group. And one of the speakers asked, are taxes going higher or lower? Every single hand in the room went up for higher. So here's 5 reasons. Every year when I redo my books to update them for new tax law changes, etc., one of the charts that I put in most of my books, I can't remember if it's in all, but in any case, is a chart that I copy from usdebtclock.org. That's a great website. It gives you up to the second understanding of what's going on with our federal debt. When I did my books last year, we were at $22 trillion of debt. When I'm doing it now in November, December, I notice we've topped over $23 trillion in just federal debt, forgetting state, local governments, and all these other things. That's almost $1 trillion in the last 11 months. We're adding $4 billion a day to our debt. So that's one thing. Number 2, 3 dates: January 1st of 08, January 1st of 11, and July 2nd of 2016. What's important about those dates? Well, everyone on this interview has heard about the baby boomers. Well, on January 1st in 08, the first of the baby boomers who are retiring at $10,000 a day turned 62, which means they're able to take Social Security. On January 1st of 11, the first started turning 65. Well, not everyone takes Social Security at 62. Some may wait to 65, but there's another huge thing that happens at age 65. They qualify for Medicare. So now you've got all these baby boomers that are going off private insurance onto the Medicare. And then July 2nd of 16, our first baby boomers turned 70 and a half. What does that mean? That means at 70 and a half, they have to start taking required minimum distributions, whether they want that money or not, out of their IRAs, 401ks, their traditional IRAs, etc. 403bs, 457. When I say IRA or 401k, I mean traditional, unless I say Roth. So all these tens of thousands of people have turning 70 and a half every day have to start taking distributions from their RMD. Number 3, David Walker. He was the chief controller of the U.S. under Clinton and Bush administrations. He wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't a Republican. He worked for both presidents. And back then on NPR radio, I think it was 2011, he boldly stated that taxes are either going to have to double or government spending is going to have to cut in half or some combination of the two. Otherwise, this country is going to be bankrupt. He
Wow.
knows, yeah, he knows the state of the finances of our country probably better than anyone. And in fact, he wrote a book, I can't think of the name of it, really detailing, and he's crisscrossing the country trying to get people to understand, hey, the longer we delay doing something about this, the worse the problem is going to be. Tax history is number 4. There is precedence for higher taxes. Income taxes started in 1913, and if you can believe it or not, it was a 1-year temporary tax.
Wow. Well, that
So
sure didn't turn out.
100 years later plus, no longer are they at 7%, and it's certainly not been a temporary tax. And in my, I think 2 of the 3 books, I show a chart of the tax rate history of the highest tax rate in the land. And it got as high as 94% at one point after World War or during World War II. It was 73%, the highest tax rate in World War I. In Vietnam, it was in the 70s. So historically, Avery, we're at the lowest taxes we've virtually ever been since, the early 1900s. And one final thing that I would say about tax rates is only one component of the tax system. There's actually 3 levers that our government has to increase their revenue. Number 1 is the tax rate. So we'll talk about those later. Number 2 is the tax brackets. Number 3 is the tax deductions and the exemptions. Now in the Trump tax law that just came about in the tax year of 2018 and 19, and we'll go through 2025, they changed the exemptions. Used to be we'd get $4,000 exemption for everyone in your family. So if you had 5 kids, a husband and wife, you had $28,000, 7 times 4 of exemptions that you didn't have to pay tax on. That changed. Now the exemption is 0. Another change that they make, again, they did change the rates and brackets, but for me, and a lot of people particularly the people that live in high income tax states like California, New York, Massachusetts, et cetera, they limited the income tax and state real estate tax deductions to $10,000 per return. So a lot of people that earn good incomes pay much higher taxes to their state, whether it's through real estate ownership or whether it's through income taxes in their state, than the $10,000 per return limit. So there's 3 levers that they have. So it's not all about tax rates per se. So I don't know if I went on too long.
Well, no, I think that's good information because you've given people a lot of food for thought, what they should, and people can go ahead and go look into this and see for themselves, and go ahead and double check everything you've said, and they'll see the same information you have. But a lot of people, I'm sure there are tons of people listening to this watch right now that have not considered these factors before. Nobody's told them before. So it might not have even been on their radar. So at least now with all of that background, they'll understand the reasons behind why you're recommending what you recommend in your books and what we're going to talk about in this interview. So, now some people might worry, like your book, it's Get Me to Zero. It's about how to pay no taxes in retirement. Now, some people are going to see that and they're going to say, oh, but I'm worried, is this going to put me at risk of tax evasion? Or maybe they worry it's unethical because they worry they won't be paying their fair share. Can you put people's mind at ease about this and tell them why that's not the worry they might think it is?
Great question, Avery. I talk about 7 strategies in my book, Get Me to Zero. And all 7 of those strategies have been in the U.S. tax code for decades. Now, there's one that's probably 8 or 9 years old, but most of them have been in there for decades. And we are not evading taxes. We are following the letter of the law, in fact, the spirit of the law, to pay our full and rightful amount of tax to the U.S. government. It's really a question of timing, Avery. So when someone makes a contribution to a traditional IRA, they get a tax deduction. They don't have to pay tax on that. Well, is that tax evasion? No, it's right in the code.
Exactly.
That we want you to save for retirement.
Yes.
But of course, we all know, or hopefully you know, when you take money out of the traditional IRA, it will be taxed. Now, Roth is just the opposite. A Roth says, no, we're going to use after-tax dollars to make your contribution today. But when you take it out, it's not taxable under current tax laws. So it's all a matter of timing. So the strategies that I mostly talk about in my book are pay income taxes on our income today and move that money into the tax-free world and never pay taxes on it again. So there's no evasion. We did pay our rightful taxes. We just paid them today instead of in retirement tomorrow, when we don't know what the tax rates will be. We don't know what the brackets or deductions or exemptions will be.
So in other words, everybody's got to pay tax once on their income. And you're just saying, it sounds to me, if I'm understanding this right, is to today we know what the tax rate is. It's a known fact. So pay now at today's rates rather than pay at the rates that we have no idea what they're going to be in future. Although for the reasons you discussed earlier, there could be a good chance they're going to go higher than today. So you can meet your legal and ethical obligation by paying it now. And
Absolutely.
get out of the way, you've paid your fair share. Whereas the other way people do it is they don't pay it today, they decide to pay it later on, kick it down the road for later. But either way, everybody's paying once. So whether you pay now or later, you're not doing anything sneaky or anything like that.
Absolutely. You've got it 100% correct. It's just a matter of timing when we're going to pay the taxes. The tax code allows us to pay them today or tomorrow.
Right. Okay, well, a lot of people, they're using 401ks and traditional IRAs to save for retirement. Can you share some cautions people should be aware of regarding these types of retirement savings vehicles?
Well, first, let me say that saving is important. So depending on your personal situations, your goals, and what your beliefs on what will happen with future tax rates, some people just, think that their taxes are going to be lower in retirement, and that's what they've always heard, and they may not understand why they'll be lower. But in any case, it doesn't make any sense then to do a Roth if you think taxes are going to be lower, if you're just looking at taxes as the main issue. So saving is important. The location of where you save is secondary, so don't forget to save. Yeah. But some of the downsides of the IRA, the traditional IRA and 401k and 403b and the federal government TSA, one of those is you have limited pre-59 and a half access. So if you want or need to get your money out, now there are some exceptions where you can take some of your money out for medical or unemployment, etc. But generally speaking, there is very little exceptions to getting your money out. And even if you can avoid the 10% pre-59 and a half penalty, you're not going to avoid the tax. You've got to pay tax on that because you got the tax deduction going in, you're going to pay tax going out. With the traditional 401ks, IRAs, people think they are saving taxes. That's only half the story. You're saving them today, but you're never saving taxes. You are only postponing them. And most advisors call it a tax deferred account. I call it like it is. It's a tax postponed account because it tells people exactly what it is. I'm not saving any taxes. I'm postponing them. And again, as we've said a couple of times, at what rates, brackets, etc. Yeah. So the other thing in a 401k plan that is a downside, depending on the plan, is there's generally limited investment choices, although more and more plans are getting better and better at that. But a regular IRA, you have unlimited places to save your money. So, but saving is important. It's just a matter of when you want to pay the tax.
Got it. How much should the average person put into their 401k and why? I mean, I'm sure there's not a one size fits all rule, but a general guidelines or thought process that you would use to help somebody figure out how much they should actually put into it.
Well, one of the best things about any work-based plan, 401k, et cetera, is it's a forced savings. It's taken out of your paycheck. You never see that money. It's not a temptation to spend it. It's gone and deposited in your retirement account without you, ever seeing it. So that's an awesome part of it. I typically say, to answer your question, is at least put in to get the full employer match. Most employers give some kind of match. So you put in X amount of dollars, they'll match 50% up to a certain dollar amount. Some they'll match you 100%. Some plans don't have any match at all. An interesting thing to understand is more and more 401k plans, et cetera, are coming out with a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k option, I should say, which allows you to contribute after-tax dollars to your 401k in the Roth portion, and the company is going to match that. However, they do not match it into your Roth portion. They match it into the tax postponed portion, but at least you're getting money added to your account. So if you have a 401k at work, I would consider contributing to that, at least until you get the full match. The match won't go into the Roth part. It'll go into the tax postponed part, but that's money that you're getting in.
Yeah, it's like free money, right?
Free money, absolutely.
Yeah, and who doesn't want that? So what are some key points people should be aware of? What about, oh, I skipped ahead here. What about Roth IRAs? What are some advantages of those? We kind of touched on the tax, paying taxes now versus later. Are there any other advantages potentially of Roth IRAs other than the tax issue?
So yes, besides what you just mentioned, with Roth IRAs, you get better access to the money that you contribute to it. You can take your contributions out of a Roth IRA at any time, not pay any tax on that. You can put it in 1 month and take it all out the next month. There's no penalty or anything. Now, on any earnings that the Roth makes, you will pay a penalty on that, a 10% penalty. If you take it out before 59 and a half or before having a Roth account for 5 years. But so that's one advantage with a Roth versus a traditional IRA. You can get your money that you put in out without any taxation or penalty. Another one that most people don't understand is a lot of people think when they retire, their Social Security is going to be tax-free. And that is not the case unless you're very poor. And a Roth distribution or a distribution from a Roth IRA in retirement will not cause your Social Security to be taxed. It's a long involved conversation. Probably don't want to get into it here, but just so the listeners know that the money that I'm putting into Social Security is not pre-tax, it's after tax, and I'm going to have to pay tax on it when I retire in all likelihood. And my distributions from a traditional IRA, my distributions from traditional 401ks, et cetera, could cause my Social Security to be taxed at a higher rate than it would be otherwise. You won't find that issue with a Roth. So a Roth will not cause you extra taxation on your Social Security.
Okay, so those are all some really good things for people to be aware of then, for sure. What are some key points people should be aware of with other types of Roths, like the Roth 401k, Roth 403b, Roth, like there's a whole bunch of them. What kind of things should people be aware of with those?
So the big points in any Roth is limited contributions. Now the IRS just came out today. I got notification that the contribution limits for a Roth or traditional IRA, for that matter, are not going to be changed for next year. But in a Roth or traditional 401k, they're going to go up a little bit. So, but in both cases, the amount that you could put in it, I mean, there's very wealthy executives that make $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and they are limited based on their age and the rules of the IRS, how much they can put in a 401k, whether it's a Roth or not. So there's limited contributions in both. In a Roth IRA, we have an added disadvantage of income limits, that if you make too much money, you can't even contribute to a Roth IRA. Now there are backdoor ways to get money into a Roth, which don't have income limits. It's not too bad to do that. But in any case, why does the IRS have limits? They just came out and increased those limits a little bit to give you an idea. A single person that makes more than $139,000 next year cannot do a Roth, and for a married couple, it's $206,000, and there's some phase-ins for incomes below that. But And in a Roth 401k, another disadvantage, Avery, is again, as I mentioned, in all 401ks, there's typically very limited investment choices.
Okay.
Mutual funds or what have you to choose from. They're getting better and better, but most plans, you do have those limitations.
Okay. How can Roth conversions help people lower the taxes they're going to pay in retirement?
Well, any income from a Roth doesn't even show up on your tax form. There is not a line for distributions from a Roth on your tax form. So it doesn't show up, and if it doesn't show up, it's not taxable. And as I mentioned earlier, distributions from a Roth will not cause your Social Security to be taxed at a higher rate than it would be otherwise. And I give some examples in my books of someone who has Roth money and traditional IRA money taking distributions along with their Social Security and retirement, and others that have all in the traditional IRA 401k, no money in the Roth, same income, and one is paying a lot more in taxes than the other. And obviously the Roth distributions are not taxable, but it also affects the Social Security, as I mentioned. There's another thing that most people don't realize, and it would be applicable to higher income people, is that the Medicare premiums for Part B and D, with D is your prescription drugs, B is your regular Medicare, the premiums are based on your income. And the more income that you have, Avery, the higher your Medicare Part B income premiums are going to be. And so Roth distributions does not figure into that calculation, which could cause your premiums to be much higher than they would be otherwise. So for example, the Medicare Part B premium just was announced yesterday as well, or today. It went up 6.3% over last year. So inflation's quite low, healthcare expenses are higher, obviously, and that went up 6.3%. So the average person, or the lower income, and when I say lower income right now, I mean a single person getting $85,000 or less in retirement, their Medicare Part B premium is going to be $144 and change next
Yeah.
year. To give you at the higher end, and I don't have the figure off the top of my head because it just came out today or whatever, but roughly income $500,000, the premium Part B income would be $500 or $600 a month instead of $144.
Big difference.
Huge difference. And
Yeah.
it gets worse and worse. They keep bringing the incomes down to get larger premiums every year. And it's kind of the Band-Aid that they're trying to put on Medicare. But in any case, Roth income does not go into that calculation of income and will not cause your Medicare Part B or D to go up.
Well, and I like that because I always think, we all hope we're going to be healthy in old age and be able to enjoy our retirement to the fullest, but you don't know. And if your health isn't awesome through no fault of your own in so many cases, there can be expenses that aren't covered by other sources that you have to pay for out of out of pocket. And paying less in taxes to me sounds like a great thing because you'll have other money set aside, which if you're healthy and things are great, well, you can spend it on whatever you want and have fun. But if you're maybe not doing so great and you need to invest in certain things to make your quality of life better that aren't covered by other sources, having that money freed up to me seems like a really good thing.
Agreed. I mean, in fact, the tagline or the subtitle of my book is use the 2019 IRS tax code to pay as little as zero income taxes during retirement and have a better life. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Make a big difference. I have another question for you about something you have talked about, which was tax bracket management. I think this was in one of your books. You had discussed this. And can you share some tips for how one can use that to determine how much money they would be wise to consider converting from a traditional IRA or 401k into a Roth?
So another great question. I found in doing lots and lots of seminars and talking with people over, one-on-one who've read my books and contacted me, that most Americans don't really understand how the US tax code works. And I talk a lot about this in my book, Get Me to Zero. But think of the tax code as a funnel that you pour water in. Your first amount that you pour water in is not going to be taxed at all if you use the standard deduction. Right now, for a couple, that's $24,400 for a married filing jointly couple. It's going up $400 next year too, I think. But in any case, and a single is half of that. And a head of household is somewhere in between those numbers. So the first, and if you have itemized deductions like mortgage interest, real estate taxes, charitable, contributions, et cetera, that are bigger than those numbers, obviously that's the first amount that is not taxed at all. So we pour that money in, let's call it the standard deduction, and we get our 24,000 or whatever, not taxed. Then the next water we pour in is taxed at 10%. And for a single person, that's about 10,000. For a married couple, it's about 20,000. Then the water we pour in after that is taxed at 12%, and the water after that at 22, 24, 32, 35, and then at 37%. So when we talk about converting a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, we want to typically try to avoid jumping you up into the next tax bracket, because when you make that conversion from an IRA to a Roth, that is taxable income in the year that you do that. So if you are in the 12% tax bracket, and for a couple, the taxable income would be under about $80,000 for that, your 12% marginal tax rate, if you did a $30,000 IRA conversion, then that 30,000 is not going to be taxed at 12, assuming you make that 80,000. It's going to be taxed at 22%. That's a huge jump. So we would not typically advise, unless you were one of those who was, hey, taxes are going to go up, I'm deathly scared of that. I want to get all this into the tax-free zone as soon as possible. So what we do is we manage the tax bracket and say, okay, based on our anticipated income, and for some people it's very easy, they're W-2 employees and they know exactly what they're going to get every year, maybe not sure of a bonus if they get one. Commission salespeople like realtors and mortgage brokers are a little harder because they never know what they're going to get from year to year. But anyway, what we try and do is say, okay, where are we going to end up as far as taxable income for this tax year? And how much room do we have in that funnel in the 12% or the 22% marginal tax rate? In other words, how much room in that, say you don't have $80,000 of taxable income, so all that extra income would be taxed at 12%, that you poured in from a Roth conversion up to that 80,000. I'm using rough numbers.
Yeah.
Anything over that, now you're paying 22% on that money.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So it sounds basically you just figure out what your income level is that would tip you off into the next tax bracket. And if that is going to mean a significant jump in tax rates, the jump is going to depend on what's tax bracket you're in to begin with. You figure out strategically what's in your best interest. Is it worth it to you to allow yourself to go into the next tax bracket because maybe it's just a little jump, or should you just keep yourself in the one you're in now? So just top up to that limit. Right?
That's a great point. So let's look at the 22% marginal tax bracket. The higher the taxes go, the wider the brackets get. They're not very wide at 10 and 12%. So at the 22% bracket, you're paying all your last income in that funnel at 22%, and a Roth conversion may push you into the 24% bracket. I could argue, I certainly wouldn't argue against it, because you're only increasing your extra tax by 2%. So that may be worth it, or maybe not to. Certainly you'd want to look at that as an alternative. But the next tax bracket from 24 is 32. So we have another huge jump. So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about tax bracket management. Let's convert our IRAs wisely, at least have our eyes open.
Right. Don't just go into it blindly, just throwing some random number out there. Try to, be strategic about it. Be smart about it. In your book, you caution that this conversion has to be done correctly in order to avoid a 20% withholding of the balance for tax purposes. Can you explain a little bit about how this should be done?
Well, okay. So if you're under age 59 and a half and you're converting a regular IRA to a Roth, you have to use outside money, non-IRA money, to pay the tax to avoid the 10% penalty. So that we want to avoid that penalty there. Now, the 20% that you refer to, Avery, that is when you have money in a 401k at work, and you tell the custodian to send you that money, because you're thinking in your mind you're going to convert it to Roth. If they send you that money, the company has to withhold 20%. Now
So that's
you
a
have
decent chunk of change.
It is, and I'm going to give you a quick story in a second. Now you have, so they're going to write a check from, IBM to, Mark Orr for the amount that I've, asked them to send me. And you can only do that if you're 59 and a half or older, because most company plans don't allow you to take money out of a traditional 401k, or you have an old 401k that you had from a previous job.
Okay.
Your current plan is not going to allow you to do that in 99% of the cases.
Okay.
But anyway, if they send you a check made out to Mark Orr, and I'll take those checks. But anyway, if they make out the check to you, you have 60 days to roll it into an IRA, a traditional IRA, without any penalty. You don't have to pay tax on that distribution. And then from there, you can convert it. But what happened to the 20%? So I had a client who worked for the federal government and just texted her yesterday and today, actually. And she wanted to move, she's over 59 and a half, from the federal government's 401k, it's called the TSP. She wanted to move out $200,000 to another place to give her more investment choices. And so when I, filled out the application for her to sign, to do this, to set up the new account and to have the paperwork done properly, to have the money taken from the TSP and put into this new account, she apparently lost that paperwork. And so she decided to go online and download her own paperwork and fill it out incorrectly. Now, obviously she didn't want to do it incorrectly, but that's what she did.
Yeah.
So she filled it out as such that they sent 80,000 of the 200,000 directly to the custodian, from one custodian to another. There's no 20% withholding in that case. The other 120,000 she filled out incorrectly, and they sent her a check for 96,000. Well, where'd that other go? Well, that's the 20% withholding. When I told her, well, you only put 96 in there, we needed 120 to fill up the 200,000 that we were looking to do, she contacted TSP and they said, sorry, there's nothing we can do. So now she texted me yesterday, Mark, it's coming near the end of the year. How much tax am I going to have to pay on that $24,000? And it's around roughly $7,000 at her bracket with the state. So
that's a bit of an ouch.
You don't want to do this wrong.
No.
So anyway, you want the check to go directly to the custodian from one custodian to another. That avoids the 20% withholding. If they send it to you,
then you have a problem.
Then you have a problem.
Got it. And what about, you talked about people that are older than 59 and a half years, for example. Is there a way, if someone is younger than 59 and a half, that one can avoid paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty when pulling money out of a traditional IRA or 401k to convert it into a Roth?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was referring to when I guess I got off track on that question that you just, but yeah, so if you're under 59 and a half and you want to convert an IRA, traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, the only way to not pay that 10% penalty, of course, you always have to pay the tax in any case, but the way to avoid the 10% penalty is using outside money from the IRA. So say you've got money at the bank or you've got a brokerage account or something like that, you're going to have to use that money to pay the tax. If you're 59 and a half or older, what most of my clients do, although I don't recommend it, because a lot of people don't have, $20,000, $30,000 sitting around in an account that they want to write a check to Uncle Sam on, they use the money inside the IRA itself, but you can't do that without the penalty. Now, there is another workaround to get money out of the traditional IRA into the tax-free zone, but it is not a Roth conversion. You can't, using this method, you cannot put it into a Roth IRA. And it's called a Section 72T.
Okay.
And that will allow you to take money out of your traditional IRA over a period of time. It has to be at least a 5-year period of time. So we're going to take a little bit every year, 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half. So if you're 40 years old, we got to do that over 19 and a half years. So
Okay.
can't, if you have 100,000 in there, we're basically converting 5,000 a year. But
Got
there
it.
is no 10% penalty when you do a 72T. Again, you're always going to pay the tax.
Okay. Okay, good, good. That's good info for people to know for sure. Can you tell us, in your book, you've mentioned life insurance as playing an important role in getting people to zero taxes in retirement. And this is something I think is overlooked by a lot of people as an option, because everybody's so focused on investing in index funds or some other kind of investment. I think life insurance is off the radar of a lot of people. Now, you mentioned in the book, though, that it has to be a very specific type of insurance to serve this purpose of helping you to lower your taxes to zero potentially in retirement. What type of policy should people be looking for if they want to go this route?
Well, in my book, of course, I talk about 7 strategies. Life insurance is one of those 7 strategies. So we have the standard deduction or itemized deduction, which we mentioned. Standard deduction for a couple's 24,000. We have Roth contributions. We have Roth conversions. And some people don't have a Roth at work they can contribute to. Some people, their income is too much, or the amounts that they want to contribute are way more than the government allows in any of those. So life insurance is a vehicle that has been in the tax code since the tax code started in 1911 or 13, and has never been a tax asset when you structure it and fund it properly. Now, there's really not a specific type of policy. There's one I talk about in the book a lot, but any cash value life insurance can be tax-free if it's set up properly. So that's whole life policies, variable life, which have like little mutual funds in them. They're called fixed UL, universal life, and index universal life. So those are all cash value policies as opposed to term insurance, which just has a death benefit. We're building cash in that policy that allow you to put after-tax dollars in. Well, what does that sound like? It sounds like a Roth.
Yeah.
It's tax deferred. Well, what does that sound like? Yeah, it's a Roth. And when we take it out properly, it's tax-free. Well, what does that sound like? It's a Roth.
Right.
It sounds like a Roth. So, I call it a supplemental or alternative Roth. Okay. So it has to be a cash value policy. I typically use the index universal life policy. I call it a 000 plan in the book. But any of those will work. A whole life policy is going to be much more conservative. Your tax-free income is probably going to be much less. A variable life is much more aggressive, and I certainly wouldn't recommend it. And a fixed universal life policy is probably not going to be so great either. But in any case, any cash value policy will work. The trick, Avery, is how you design the policy. What we do with life insurance when we're designing it for supplemental tax-free retirement income is to turn what most people do with life insurance upside down. So most people want, with term insurance or any really, when they're buying it for a death benefit, they want the biggest death benefit for the smallest premium. And that makes sense if that's what you're looking to do. But when we're looking to fund supplemental retirement income with tax-free distributions from our policy, we want to do the exact opposite. We want to put as much into that policy as the IRS will allow and make the death benefit as little as the IRS makes us have, so that the expenses in that policy are as little as possible. And then it becomes a very efficient place to grow your wealth. But if you don't do it right, I always say don't do life insurance as part of your retirement plan. Do it to protect your loved ones. Use a term policy or one that will last you till age 100 or something. where you're looking for premium and death benefit, low premium, high death benefit. But if we're looking for another strategy to get tax-free retirement income, you got to make the death benefit as little as possible, and the funding, putting as much in. I have clients that put $100,000 or more a year into their life insurance policies. They can't put that much into a Roth or IRA or any of those type of plans. So this is particularly for, wealthier people, or maybe they just inherited. Maybe mom and dad died and then they're getting $500,000 from the sale of mom and dad's house or something like that, or their IRAs. Well, where are we going to put that money? They can't contribute that money to a Roth. So they could put it into a life insurance policy that's properly funded, which would give them what they would be looking for in a Roth.
So in other words, use the other strategies first, but if you've exhausted everything you can do with those and you've got a chunk of money that you have to do something with, this would be an option to potentially consider.
Yeah, I could argue that the life insurance is much more flexible than the other two, but I have absolutely nothing bad to say about a Roth or a 401k or IRA or a Roth conversion, except for the limitations that we have in the contributions in those. 100%, of my own retirement money is in life insurance. Now, I am not suggesting that's right for everybody. It's just that I understand these so well, and I make too much money for a Roth contribution. Backdoor I could do, but a $7,000 contribution isn't going to give me the lifestyle that I want in retirement. And I have so much more flexibility with the life insurance. When you take money out of a Roth for any reason, you can never put it back in. It's stuck there forever. Now you can get it. As I mentioned earlier, your contributions, you can take them out at any time without any taxes, but you can't say, you know what, I took that $20,000 out of a Roth to buy a new boat or down payment on a rental property or whatever it was. You can't go back and put that $20,000 back into the Roth at any time. So anyway, they're all good. And of course, like a Roth IRA, you have to income qualify. If you make too much money, as I mentioned, you can't do it. Well, with life insurance, you have to health qualify. So not everybody can get life insurance because their health may not be good. In those cases, we typically will use the life of a spouse, a business partner, a parent, or even a child, if there's an insurable interest. But they're all ways that you can get to the tax-free zone, and most of my clients use some combination of them.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting strategy. And I just thought, I don't see that kind of thing written about in a lot of mainstream blogs or whatever, financial columns even. So I just thought it really piqued my interest. And so I wanted to ask you about it to find out more, because it intrigued me, as an option that I don't think gets discussed very often, frankly.
Yeah, it's $2 billion went into cash value life insurance for this purpose last year, into the Index Universal Life IUL 000 plan, as I've trademarked it.
Wow.
So $2 billion, and that's growing every single year. And that's first year premium, because most, you're funding these over a period of years. So, that's $4 billion plus from, the ones that bought a year ago, on top of the $2 billion this year. So it is a growing area, and but the policy has to be designed properly to make it work for what you want it to if you're looking for supplemental retirement income.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. In your book, you talk about sequence of returns risk and the retirement red zone. I was really struck by the example you shared in your book, where two people retiring only a few years apart had drastically different outcomes in terms of their retirement funds because of this. For those who are unfamiliar with these terms, can you explain what the sequence of returns risk and retirement red zone are and how they can impact one's retirement?
So sequence of returns risk refers to returns that you get in your account, IRA or what have you, and you're taking money out during retirement. So it kind of makes sense for people if we have bad returns in our early years when we're just starting out and we're taking money out of our account. We're having kind of a double whammy. We're taking money out of the account and the account is dropping because the market's dropping. So we're getting a twofold negative issue there. So in the book, and I think it's in two of my books, I talk about Bill and Jill, a brother and a sister.
Yeah.
And Bill retires in 1999 with $1 million. He has it all in the Vanguard S&P fund, which is a very low-cost fund. He's going to use the 4% rule, which is a rule of thumb for taking withdrawals from your account. And so he's going to take $40,000 out of that account every year and have that $40,000 grow by the rate of inflation. So he ended up pretty good because he retired in 1996. So his first 3 years of retirement, including his withdrawals, his account was actually growing. And in 2013 or something like that, he has $1.5 million in his account despite all those withdrawals. His younger sister Jill retires 3 years later, same amount of money, $1 million, same investment, the Standard & Poor's 500 index. But unfortunately, Jill retired in 1999, so she only had one good year instead of 3 or 4 good years. And then she had 2000, 2001, and 2002, 3 years where over those 3 years, and Bill had the same 3 years of returns, 50% drop over the 3 years in that account. But she didn't have any good years to start off. So basically she was starting out behind, and, I forget how many years later, she has $278,000 in her account or something like that. I don't have the book in front of me to refer to the exact figures, but Bill has $1.5 million. She has 200 something thousand dollars. Her retirement is toast.
Yeah.
She cannot continue to take $50,000 out a year for the rest of her life on a $270,000 account. Bill, on the other hand, is fine. So it's the returns in the early years that have a negative or a positive, in Bill's circumstance, impact on the longevity of that account. And I would say that sequence of returns has no effect whatsoever on a lump sum. So say you inherited $10,000, you put it in an account. It doesn't matter the order of returns over the next 20 years. You could reverse the order of returns, or any order of the returns that you get, you're going to end up with the exact same dollar of money in that account if you added no money or subtracted no money from the account. But when you're adding money or subtracting money through distributions, sequence of returns can be your friend or can be your foe.
Yeah, that example just really illustrated very strongly how dramatically it can screw up your retirement. And so then I wondered, well, what can people do to minimize these risks? Is there anything somebody can do to help protect themselves against this? Because it's pretty freaking scary to think of that, especially the stark difference between those two in that example, what ended up happening.
Well, let's see, if you have a crystal ball and you know what's going to happen in the next few years in the market, that will solve that problem. You'll either delay retirement or retire earlier. So one of the things that I like as part of a retirement plan, and we'll go back to the life insurance, is the zero floor. The 000 plan, I get 000, why I call it 000, trademarked it, is for 3 reasons. We have no income limits. You can make as much as you want and contribute to one. There's no contribution limits. You can put in $500,000 a year. I have people that, not personally, but my friends have clients that are putting $500,000 a year into their 000 plan. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that there's no stock market risk. So there's 3 zeros: 0 stock market risk, 0 contribution, 0 income limits. That's why I call it 000.
Yeah.
So when you have no market losses on your account, and the worst case that happens is going to be a 0 return when the market goes negative, that solves a lot of the sequence of return problem. Now, you can do that kind of a thing in an IRA as well. There's some products out there that have a 0 floor. So that's one way, is eliminating the negative years with a 0 floor.
Got it. There's probably going to be a trade-off for that in terms of potential returns that people would have to consider, but it certainly sounds appealing to also not have to worry about having your retirement trashed just by bad luck in terms of timing, you know?
Right. You're exactly right, Avery. So with a zero floor, there is a trade-off, and depending on the insurance product, it would be a cap on your returns of, say 10, 12%. It would be, so they have caps, spreads, and participation rates. So you'd have a cap if the S&P went up 15% and the cap was 12, you'd only get 12% of that. A spread, and I talk about this in the book, say it's 5%. The insurance company gets the first 5% of the return through, and they're spending that money to do this, so it's not going into their pocket. But anyway, they'd get the spread first, the 5% in this case, and you'd get everything above that. So in 2013, when the S&P went up 32%, you would have gotten 32 minus the 5% spread is 27%.
Right.
And then there's participation rates, 50, 60%. So whatever the S&P does, you would get 50 or 60% of that. So you're right, there is a break on the gains, but that floor, particularly when you're taking money out in retirement, is critical, as we just saw with Bill and Jill.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that was really something, that difference was really just unbelievable to me. It was quite shocking. I was sad on their behalf. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, Jill is in big trouble.
She's in hot water. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, no, nobody has all their money in the S&P 500, right? Most people are going to have some in bonds and that kind of a thing. Probably not going to stick her head in the sand and just keeping out that same withdrawal rate, even though her account is, hopefully. But it just really shows you the point, the effective sequence of returns can have. Another thing that people can do to help eliminate that is there are guaranteed income annuities out there that will give a guaranteed lifetime income. So it doesn't matter what happens in the account, it's going to give you a guaranteed lifetime income. And so even if you exhaust all the funds in that account, that as long as you're breathing, or if it's a joint income, that income is going to continue to come in. So that's another thing that we do to suppress sequence of returns risk. And the other thing is when you're just investing in the market, stocks, bonds, real estate, et cetera, our firm uses proactive tactical management. We just don't sit there and say, oh, the market will come back. It always has come back. Well, that's fine when you're contributing, but when you're taking money out, you've got to go to cash or partially cash or hedge your bets. And that's what our firm does in that regard. So there's, a few things that you can do to minimize sequence of returns risk.
Right. So it's not necessarily like you're totally stuck being a sitting duck, because in reality, if things started going south too early, you could make adjustments to help protect yourself. And I would imagine, heck, if it got really bad, person could get a part-time job or start a side hustle just to ride out a few bad years. Hopefully they have enough built up. They don't have to resort to that, because nobody wants to think of going back to work in retirement. But I mean, if things are really dire, there are things people could do, I imagine, too.
That's absolutely true. Don't stick your head in the sand.
Yeah. Yeah. I have another thing I wanted to touch on before we end the interview is a safe withdrawal rate. Because in one of your books, you discussed what you kind of thought might happen in future, and you discussed your thoughts on the safe withdrawal rate, the traditional rule of thumb that a lot of people go by. And so I wanted to ask you what kind of inflation you would be planning for when determining how much income we'll need in retirement. Is it safe to just assume that what's happened in the last 30 years is going to keep happening, or what's your gut feeling on this?
Well, when I do a retirement income plan for people, I use a 3% inflation rate.
Yeah.
As a general. Now, some years will have less, some years will have more. And just because the government says it's a 2.8% one year, or 1.6 another year, or 4.8 another year, doesn't mean that's your personal inflation rate.
Very true.
Right? So
depends where you live, among other things.
Depends where you live. It depends what you spend. You have an inflation rate because you need a new roof. Well, that wasn't in your planned spending, but you don't want to get wet when you're sleeping, so you put a new roof on or fix it. Medical costs are huge. You develop some medical issue. that the drugs are very expensive for. So maybe medical inflation was only 6.3% for the average, which is what Medicare did this year on their Part B premium.
Hmm.
But your medical expense doubled because of this new medication or copays or whatever. So
Absolutely.
I typically use a 3% as a general rule. I think we're in a low inflationary environment right now. I think we'll probably stay in one for a while. But the government has incentives to try and push inflation up. And the reason is our $23 trillion of debt. Inflation makes paying those dollars back less costly in present dollars.
Got it.
So they want high inflation because that'll make the real cost of that debt much lower. So, but I think for the next few years will be lower than normal. But as I say, everybody's inflation rate is going to be different from one year to the next. It could be very, very different from the official, CPI figures.
And what about if we're looking at long term? Because if somebody's retiring like really long term, if somebody's retiring at 65, let's say, or let's say they love their job and they work till they're 70 because they just love what they do. Those people, if they live till they're 90 or 100, they've got 20 or 30 years to make their retirement funds last. They're just trying to predict 20 to 30 years in the future. What about the person who has figured out, either because they just earned a heck of a lot of money and were able to retire maybe when they're 45 or 50? Say the 45-year-old, they might be alive another 45, 55 years to make those funds last. So for somebody in that situation, do you think 4%, 4% or even 3%, do you think that's maybe too risky? Should they try to maybe be a little more conservative in how much they withdraw? Or, what would your advice to that person be?
They better have a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Or they want to live very frugally.
Yeah.
So the general 4% rule came out, economist, Bill Bengen came out in 1996 with this rule. He studied all 30-year returns of the S&P and the bonds going back to 1926. And he suggested a 4% withdrawal rate would give you a 90% chance of not outliving your money for 30 years.
Okay.
Then in 2013, after 5 years of the financial crisis, Morningstar came out and said, you know what? We think it's a 2.8% withdrawal rate is safe to give you a 90% chance of not outliving your money.
Mm-hmm.
The Wall Street Journal the same year came out and said, we think it's a 1.7% rate. Now, I can't wrap my head around 1.7. 2.8, that may still be a little low, particularly if you have some of these guardrails in place that we just talked about.
Yeah.
0% floors, et cetera, not just sitting and watching your account go to nothing, having professional management there. But the Morningstar 2.8 to 3.5, I think is a pretty good rule of thumb. I think 4%, you've got to be very, very proactive and really have to have their sequence of returns risk. I was in Dallas last week, and one of my faculty members of the RICP program, Retirement Income Certified Professional, is an author, Dr. Wade Pfau, PFAU, and he wrote a book I mentioned in my books about reverse mortgages. He's an academic. He's a doctor of economics, personal economics. Of course, he's on the faculty. He's a CFA, certified financial analyst. So he actually helped Morningstar with that study in 2013, he and two other authors.
Yeah.
But in any case, I was with him and he was one of our speakers last week and got to chat with him a little bit. And he's kind of talking about 3.7 lately.
Interesting.
And we have two factors that have really going against us. Market is at all-time highs, and it's not going to go up forever. Everyone knows that. We don't know when it's going to go down, how much it's going to go down, but it's not going to continue to go up forever. It never has and never will.
Right.
The opposite side of that is bonds are at their highest. With interest rates being low, bond prices are high. So if interest rates start to rise, bond prices will go down. And the market is going to go down at some point. So we're at a very perilous time to think about retiring, in my opinion. I don't know if it's this year, next year, whatever, but we may be more like Jill than Bill if we retire at the wrong time.
Yeah, because a lot of the times when you read about where you should put your money to protect yourself from ups and downs will say, well, put this much in bonds and this much in, stocks or whatever. And then when one falls, the other goes up, and everything will, it'll all work out. But if they're both high and they both we have reason to believe they might both kind of start going down at the same time, then that theory's out the window.
Yeah, we've been in a 30-year bull market in bonds. So in the 1980s, interest rates were very high. I don't know if your readers or listeners will remember this, but mortgages were 10, 15, 20%.
Yeah, I remember my parents talking about that, and that's just ouch is all I can say.
So since that time, mortgages have come down to 4% range, and of course mortgages are bonds. So interest rates have come down. Those values of the people that bought a 30-year bond 30 years ago that were paying 12%, 15%, those things are worth a lot of money. The U.S. Treasury bond, 10 years, is guaranteed by the U.S. government. 10-year Treasury bond started out 2018 at about 3%, or 19 rather. It went down to about 1.45 this year, and now it's about 1.9. Every time that bond's moving, the price of the bond values goes up and down. So, yeah.
It sounds like caution would be wise.
Well, and the other thing I would say, Avery, is it's not a set it and forget it, right? So if the market is down 10 or 15%, despite our good efforts to using some accounts with floors, et cetera, using some tactical management in our investments, say we're down 10 or 15%. Well, maybe you don't give yourself an increase in distributions that year to make up for inflation. You cut out the trip, to Europe or whatever it is. You are proactive on an annual basis of, what's really going on in my account. And when you have a good year, maybe you want to take some of that money and put it in a safe place so that it's not subject to a market loss. And it's there when you need it in a down year.
Yeah, that's all excellent advice. Really good advice. I can't thank you enough for coming on to do this interview with me, because we talked about some, meaty topics, and I think it's going to be enormously helpful to anybody who takes the time to listen to this. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't had a chance to discuss already? Any final thoughts?
Well, I would say as a final thought, I've talked about life insurance a little bit as a Roth alternative. And I also mentioned earlier that when you take money out of a Roth IRA, you cannot put it back in.
Yep.
And one of the things I talk about in my book is something called the private reserve. And that's where your retirement money can actually work in two places at one time. So we can have it working in our life insurance policy, borrow it out of our life insurance policy, and invest it someplace else and have it working in two places at once. So that's kind of an interesting topic that readers may want to look into more in my book. The other thing is mostly we've been talking about individuals today with saving money for retirement with the various tax strategies. If you have some listeners out there that are successful business owners, I list about 15 different strategies in my book. I don't go into them. It's not applicable to everybody, that business owners can take advantage of to save taxes today, or delay them, or avoid them altogether, depending on their personal circumstances. So there's a lot of things out there that your readers can take it, or listeners can take advantage of, and they just got to start taking some action and learning about them and seeing if it makes sense to them. So I would encourage them not only to save, that's the savings number one, but to broaden your horizons a little bit and look at other options besides the traditional options.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I would encourage everybody, I went through both, your books, and they're meaty, they're very good. And we couldn't possibly, there was no way we could go into everything that you wrote about here. So I would encourage anybody listening to this, if you want to know more about any of this, please do check out his books. I grabbed them from Amazon. I'm sure they may be available in other places as well. Where can people find you online if they want to know more about your services or check out your books and that kind of thing?
Avery, the best place to get my books, of course, you can get them on Amazon, but find where they are. They're all directly linked there. Learn about what I do, join my email list, etc., is my website, www.smartfinance.com. smartfinancialplanning.com. All one word, smartfinancialplanning.com. They can join my email list. I do blogs on there. Sometimes I've got a wealth of videos. There's a ton of information on that website. From there, they can link to my Instagram, to my Facebook, to my LinkedIn. So that's probably the best place to go if they want to find out a little bit more.
Fantastic. Thanks again for coming on with me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this interview since you said yes. So thanks again for your time today.
Well, I've had a great time with you, Avery, and I appreciate you asking me aboard this. I'm excited for your success with this whole program.